Hi, everyone. Welcome to Resistance Live. It's Monday, the 17th of March, 2025. And man, the last few days this weekend were rough. This morning continues to be very rough. I already had a meeting for one of our courses this morning where I don't know how to put it. Everybody is kind of like struggling today. And I just want all of you to know that if that's you also, you are very much not alone. What we're living through is extremely difficult. So let's talk about exactly what's going on in terms of these mass deportations now in this order and the emergency order that is just the emergency hearing that's just been set for 5 p.m. today. First things first, today for our visually challenged viewers, I'm wearing a cream-colored ribbed sweater. My hair is down. I have a pair of thick gold hoop earrings in. I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman, and I'm in front of a bookshelf and my yellow utility cart. And I'm coming to you, as always, from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohican land. Okay, so let's review what happened. On Saturday, Donald Trump declared under an ancient law that is the same law that was used, by the way, to intern Japanese Americans during World War II, that he was invoking the law to essentially deport Venezuelans without due process. And there was an emergency hearing set within several hours of a motion being filed with class action status attached to stop the implementation of that executive order. Judge Boasberg, who happens to be the chief judge of the district court for the District of Columbia, so very high profile, high level, well-respected judge, held an emergency hearing on Saturday evening. And I discussed this a little bit yesterday for our Patreon subscribers on our regular Sunday progressive coffee hour, but what happened at that hearing is essentially unprecedented. Now, many of you know I was a federal court class action lawyer for the first 7 years that I practiced. That this judge certified a class in an oral hearing in front of the parties in the space of about an hour. And I've never heard of anything like that happening. Essentially, what he did was he made sure that every person who was arguably affected by this order was within the class. He then issued a nationwide ban on deportation under the order, and also informed the federal attorneys that were there for Trump's DOJ that the planes that were in the air, which, by the way, took off while the hearing was pending, needed to be turned around and returned to the United States. What ended up happening thereafter is that the planes were not turned around. And what we have since learned is that there was a determination, quote unquote, inside the White House that because the planes were over international waters, the order didn't apply. That is false. I want to make this really clear. The propaganda that is coming out of the White House, including through retweets from Marco Rubio and others, are based on an absolute legal fallacy. The order applied to agencies of the United States of America located inside the United States of America, no matter where the planes were located at the time. So this argument that they're going to make, presumably at this 5 o'clock emergency hearing, really doesn't hold any water. So 3 planes landed in Honduras and El Salvador after the order was entered. And in case you've missed it, the United States government, in conjunction with the El Salvadoran dictator, are now deporting people to El Salvador into slave labor camps that are designed like concentration camps. There's no outdoor yards. There's no big windows. There's no ability to go outside. And they are forcing people to work in these slave labor camps for at least a year and getting paid, meaning like the El Salvadoran government is getting paid by the U.S. to do this. We have no idea who was on those planes. Nobody was effectively given any due process, period. We're being asked to take the word of the Trump administration that the people who were deported were criminals or terrorists or monsters. Various dehumanizing language has been used to apply to these people. And then this morning, we have Tom Homan, the head of ICE, out there on major media. I've seen 2 interviews so far saying that he doesn't care what the judges say. They're going to keep deporting people. It does, he doesn't care what the judges say. He doesn't care what the radical left says, quote unquote. They're going to keep deporting people. And he was asked on the White House lawn this morning how they know that the people that they're deporting are quote unquote terrorists. And among the other things that he said is that they've looked at people's social media feeds. So let me just reiterate something that I've said here several times. Okay. I said this about Mahmoud Khalil, and I'm going to say it again here. Okay. If they are rounding up and deporting people based on their exercise of free speech and claiming those people are terrorists for things that they've posted on social media and deporting them without due process, not a single person inside the United States of America is free. Like, there's really kind of no other way to put it, because any one of us could be next. They are essentially rounding up people, saying that we should take their word for it, and sending them to slave labor camps. That's the short version of what's happening right now. And, you know, if that doesn't scare the living shit out of you, I don't know what will. Sorry. I mean, I know you guys come to me relying on me to talk you off the ledge. Today is not that day. All right. This is really scary stuff. And I want to remind you all that when they first started talking about doing this, they did not just include people who they claimed were here unlawfully or on undocumented status. They have now rounded up and deported people who were here on legal status, people with green cards. They've rounded up and deported people who were here on legitimate student visas. And we have no way of knowing, just want to make this really clear, no way of knowing that they haven't actually already deported citizens. So, you know, this is a very serious breaking point for American democracy that we're all living through right now, because they have essentially said, we're not going to comply with the court's order no matter what. And we also had a notice filed with the court over the weekend after the order went into place, signed by the Attorney General, by deputy AGs like Emile Beauvais and Todd Blanche, who of course represented Trump in criminal court in New York, and other senior officials at the DOJ, that essentially made the argument that the planes were over international waters, therefore it didn't matter. And I don't think this judge is going to give one bit of weight to that. But the fact that the AG has signed it tells us everything we need to know about what this administration thinks about the rule of law. So I have to say there was a moment when all of this was going down. And, you know, there were questions coming in on the Patreon feed over the weekend for Progressive Coffee Hour, and then some more this morning, where people were like, are we at a constitutional crisis yet? We've been in one, like, for a while now. This is the latest manifestation of it, and the most serious. And I will just tell you that if we have an organization inside the government who is willing to round up people and deport them without due process, fascism is here, folks. Like, there's no debate about it anymore. We're not falling in the direction of fascism. We're not sliding down the slippery slope. It's arrived. And, you know, I don't know how to be any more blunt about that. I can't make it easy for anybody. Like, it's here. And given especially that we don't know who is on those planes, we have no way of tracking those folks. They've been denied legal counsel. They've been denied due process. They haven't appeared before a judge to determine whether or not any of the allegations that are being made against them by ICE are true. They literally have just been rounded up and stuck on a plane with the claim that they're terrorists and sent to a concentration camp. Like, this is what it looks like. So the real question right now is whether or not there is going to be enforcement by this judge. And that's the reason why this hearing at 5 o'clock is so important. By the way, the dial-in number is public. So, you know, you can dial in and listen to the hearing as long as you abide by the rules of the court. The minute order is circulating out there. Many of you know I follow Big Cases Bot on Blue Sky. I've reposted the details from that this morning, which includes the minute order from Judge Boasberg on the hearing this afternoon. So let's just walk back through contempt a little bit here, because there were some questions, because contempt is what we're looking at, frankly. There were some questions about contempt this morning on the Patreon feed. And I just want to make some things clear to everybody, because I know there's like a lot of panic out there about the U.S. Marshals. And we talked about this like a month ago or more, when there was concern about the U.S. Marshals potentially not carrying out an order to arrest someone for contempt. So the interesting thing is that under the rules, the judge has the ability to appoint someone to carry out contempt orders. It does not have to be the U.S. Marshals. The rules are actually very explicit on this when it comes to civil contempt, that the judge can appoint someone to be the person who seizes assets or executes on a contempt order in other ways, which can include, by the way, sending people to jail. And so the story here is not over, even if, let's say, hypothetically, Trump orders the U.S. Marshals to not abide by a court order on contempt, because the judge has the ability to enforce that order through other means. The real question here is what enforcement's going to look like, because there's a lot of people now in the crosshairs. There's Tom Homan, quite obviously. There's Pam Bondi. There's everybody who signed on to that notice, which includes, of course, Emile Beauvais and, Todd Blanche and others. There was a list of about like 15 lawyers from the DOJ who signed it. The real question here is what's this going to look like? And I will just say that I think, sending Tom Homan to the clink would probably have a chilling effect on this, but I don't know. The other thing I keep thinking about is how this could potentially be used as a form of propaganda to wind up the base. So the other thing to be aware of here is that the El Salvadoran dictator, after the planes landed in El Salvador, tweeted something that said, "Oopsie, too late," with a smiley face on Twitter. And that was reposted by Marco Rubio, the current United States Secretary of State. So I have to remind you all that a lot of people voted for Rubio, including in the Democratic Party. And he is all in, quite clearly. Now, do I think that Marco Rubio is going to be the person who is subject to the contempt order? I don't think he's actually the most direct and obvious person, but you never know. So this hearing at 5 o'clock is going to be very interesting, because I'm just going to say something here. Like, if there is not effective enforcement of this court's order, it's going to be a free-for-all from here on out. Like, we're going to see things like what was threatened this weekend on Twitter by DeSantis's former campaign guy, to denaturalize folks like Mehdi Hassan and deport them. He's a U.S. citizen. And they're threatening to do that. They're threatening to deport other people simply for speaking out. And none of this is funny. None of it is not serious. And the real question then becomes, like, who's next? And so it's incredibly critical at this point that, the judge really dropped the hammer. And from what I have read about this judge, who was not I'll just be really candid, was not the chief judge when I was practicing in federal court in DC. He took over from Beryl Howell, who was the prior chief judge, who's now on semi-retired status in 2023. He was also the chief judge, by the way, who oversaw the grand jury impaneled in Washington, DC about January 6th. So he has some prior experience with Trump's criminality. It's going to be very interesting to see what he does at 5 o'clock. And frankly, the danger that we're in right now as a country is something that I truly hope he takes as seriously as it is, because we're not just talking about the First Amendment anymore. We're talking about, like, the suspension of due process rights for anyone that they decide they don't like. And, there are other reports from this weekend that they deported a woman who had been in the country since she was a teenager, who's a mother of a number of kids. I think it's like 5 kids. They deported her from Milwaukee to Laos. She doesn't speak the language. She doesn't know anybody there. She hasn't lived there in like decades. And they deported her just like randomly, decided that she had to go with all her kids and her family still located in Milwaukee. So this is the kind of thing that is underway right now against like average everyday folks, who are here. And I will also just say that I think on top of what happened to Mahmoud Khalil and another Columbia University student, and the fact that a Columbia student had to flee to Canada because she perceived herself to be under threat simply because she had liked human rights related posts on social media. They sent ICE to her dorm room. This is a moment where things are declining extremely fast. So look, I just have to tell you, if you're feeling out of sorts, you are not alone. And if you're feeling scared about how this is going, you're not alone. And what I said to our class this morning, and what I will say to all of you, is that, like, this is a time to get in community with people who care about you, and also to stop doom scrolling, because literally, like, people are showing signs of anxiety and depression for obvious reasons. And it's really critical that if that's you, you seek out help or you seek out support, because none of this is easy. There's no easy way out of this. There's no way to talk you guys off the ledge of this one. Again, I'm really sorry, but this is where we are. And it's very real. The threat is very real. And, I spent a lot of time this weekend thinking about it, even through personal lenses, right? It is not a moment where I can tell you guys that everything's going to be all right. So, one of the things that I want to just mention here is that I know folks are seeking like another way out. I had a question again this morning on the Patreon feed about the 25th Amendment. I have to remind you all that the 25th Amendment cannot be invoked unless a majority of the cabinet decide that Trump is unfit to serve. That will never happen. Okay. The 25th Amendment will never be invoked. His entire cabinet right now is packed with sycophants who are wildly unqualified and are only there in most instances because they were either huge Trump donors or they're all in on MAGA ideologically. Kristi Noem's not going to vote for the 25th Amendment. Marco Rubio's not going to vote for the 25th Amendment. Linda McMahon's not going to vote for the 25th Amendment. RFK Jr. is not going to vote for the 25th Amendment because he's just as insane. So there is no way of removing him right now. And I have to remind you all, impeachment starts in the House Judiciary Committee, which is currently controlled by the Republicans. They're not going to vote to impeach him. So we are where we are. Plus, JD Vance isn't going to be any better. JD Vance is out this morning tweeting stuff about how terrorists were removed from the country and Donald Trump is keeping his promises. So, the question right now is about like survival and sanity. And hopefully the court's doing the right thing. And I will remind you all that one of the ways to stay sane through all of this is to take action. So I had a question this morning on the Patreon feed about protesting. And I do want to remind you all that the Tesla takedown protests are very effective. I know many of you in this community have already attended one. They are having a direct and concrete impact on Elon Musk's wealth, his stability, and fundamentally, in the long haul, I think whether or not he stays in some capacity in federal government, his wealth is being tanked as a result of those protests, and they are only growing. So if you want to get involved in something, I will just tell you that everybody I know who has been to one has said that they are like peaceful, sometimes hilarious, directed in the right way, right? They're causing people to trade in their Teslas. Mark Kelly traded in his Tesla last week. They're causing people to stop buying Teslas, and the resale market for Teslas is tanked. The stock is in the toilet. So, this is a way to take really concrete action with really effective messaging that is adversely affecting I would argue, one of the top two most powerful people in this administration. So you can get involved in that way. And I think it's really critical to do that. There's also plenty of reporting from overseas that, the Tesla takedown protests there have had an impact. I think we have to keep going, right? The other thing I'm just going to say here is that, as many of you know, I think everybody who's been here before knows, I have been advocating since the day after the election that you get involved in mutual aid where you live. There's a lot of looming bad news about Social Security right now. I know many folks saw the article in the Seattle Times over the weekend about someone who the Social Security Administration declared dead who was not, and what it took for him to actually get his Social Security payments restarted, which is a saga. You should go seek that out if you need it, if you haven't seen it yet. But I do want to remind you all that there's plenty of ways to get involved on a local level that are not necessarily about taking overt direct political action, but that are also about being in community with people who are going to help keep other people alive. And one or the other of those is where you need to be right now. I do want to mention to people that we have a webinar, because I know a lot of people have been talking about this. We decided to do a webinar this Friday on the topic of how to build a community of change makers, even if you feel alone. And I'm going to drop into the live chat right now the link for that, because I want you guys to know that there are plenty of other people out there who are in that boat, who truly are in a position where they feel like they don't know anybody. They don't know how to get to know anybody in their own communities who's on the same journey they're on. I just want you all to know that, there are people out there. Just trust me on this. And we're going to do this free webinar on Friday that's going to tell all of you how to go about actually getting where you need to get to on this front, so that you can actually build community where you live. And by the way, it's also dropped into the show notes if you need it there, and I'll make sure we drop it into the comments as well. I want people to understand something, okay? The thing that's really dangerous about this moment that we're living through is that because it is so anxiogenic and because it is so isolating, we tend to have this perception that doom scrolling is a way to manage the anxiety, and it's really not. The thing that is going to make the difference is being in community with people who actually see the world the same way you do. And if you're not, like, you really need to get in community with people now. And I mean that in a very serious way. Like, this is not the moment to sit at home and do nothing if you have the capacity to actually leave your house. And I want folks to know that there is new Indivisible chapters springing up everywhere. Indivisible chapters meetings are being like overflowed, like you wouldn't believe. Somebody in the Patreon feed went to one that was supposed to have 30 over the weekend. They had 200 people. One of the things that we also need to keep in mind here is that there's lots of opportunities to get involved in local organizations, food banks, Unitarian Universalist justice chapters, getting involved with organizations that support immigrants, getting involved with organizations that support LGBTQ people. There are people everywhere, including in places that you would not expect, who are doing the work of helping other people to survive. And so we'll talk about all of that on Friday, but I also just want people to know that now is the moment. Like, if for whatever reason you've had the thing of like, I don't need to do that, or I don't have the energy to do that, now is the moment when you need to do it. And I just very much want to encourage people to kind of start seeking out community, because it literally is going to be the difference between whether or not we make it through this or not. And, you know, we do really hope that the courts are going to do their part, that Judge Boasberg is going to do his part this afternoon, that we're going to see additional enforcement, that we're going to see a chilling of essentially this rounding up of people and just sticking them on planes. But also, we really do need to have a moment now of, like I said, a hammer being dropped, because if something doesn't happen to stop this, all bets are off. And, you know, the threats that are being thrown around are really not to be taken lightly. Okay. That's all I've got for today, folks. I want to let you know that there will not be a broadcast this Thursday for personal reasons. So I will be here Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday this week. Thursday, there will be no broadcast. All right. And I'll make sure that I post that, you know, in the community section of YouTube, and it'll go up on Patreon like it always does. But just so you're aware, that's the case for this week's scheduling. All right. Please don't forget to like this broadcast. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Share it with folks that you know who may benefit from this. There's a lot of people who need it right now. Trust me, I know that. And also, please don't forget to drop me a comment below, because it tells the algorithm that you like what we're doing here. And if this really supports you, please make sure that that you're supporting us over on patreon.com/resistancelive, because even that $5 a month donation really helps to keep us going and helps me to pay my staff. So I will catch you all tomorrow at regular time, Wednesday at regular time, Friday at regular time. And I will hopefully see all of you in our webinar on Friday, which will come right after the broadcast at 1 p.m. Eastern. All right. Take care, everyone. Please take care of yourselves this week. Like, please do what you need to do to make sure that you're feeling grounded. It's really hard in this era. There's nothing wrong with, like, you know, moving away from the news for 24 hours or however long you need. Take a nap, cuddle your dog, go for a walk, see your friends, like go to yoga class, do whatever's going to make it easier for you. Go get medication if you need it. Consult a psychotherapist. Like, seriously, if you're struggling, like, this is not a moment to skip any of that. All right, folks, I will see you tomorrow. Take care. And obviously I will be, as much as I can, I have an overlapping event for my kid, but I will be live streaming the hearing as much as I can, or sharing the live streams of others if I'm not able to be on the call live this afternoon. All right, everyone, take care. Bye.